My dudes, as many of you know, the Twilight Monk video game has just been announced to be scheduled to be released in March on both Nintendo Switch and PC. Now, currently, right now, you could be playing the demo over on Steam for their next Fest event. Now that you can actually play this first part of the game, there's no greater time for me to do the director commentary. Now, I'm going to show you some, like, where the concepts came from. We're going to talk about the scenes in the game that were present in the novels and how it ties together with the novels. We're going to talk a little bit about the conceptualization of where some of these ideas came from. It's not going to be much longer of a wait for you to play the full game, but this first section, there's so much meaty stuff here that I want to dig into. So yeah, you're also going to get to see my Twilight Monk skills, my gameplay skills. I'm going to mostly focus on the development though, and I'm going to talk a little bit about just tone and what the perspective was when I was writing the script and when I was putting together the scenarios and all that stuff and some of the challenges we faced as developers. If you're a game developer, this should be interesting to you. If you're just really into this game and you're just really interested in the world and the lore and that kind of stuff, this will be really good insight for you as well. And yeah, so let's just dive right into it. All right, let's dig in. All right, so I'm playing this on the Nintendo Switch. You're going to get a little bit more of a performance bump on PC, obviously. The Nintendo Switch is now about a 10-year-old system. So this opening sequence, I had to decide, how do I just get the core concept down as quickly as possible? I didn't want to do tons and tons of storyboards and sequences because I don't like when an RPG asks you to, read 30 minutes of text before you get to the action, decide whether you like the game or not. I just wanted to get this immediate sense of what is the conflict. And you see this peaceful crescent isle, and then you see this explosion blowing up part of the island. If you've read the books, you know the shape of the crescent moon that's, hovering above the island. They build out all these structures throughout it. So there's something dire immediately right away. Immediately, you start out in a platforming area. You can jump, you can drop your pillar, you can do a couple of things here to get used to, what am I supposed to do? But, if you try to go back through the gate, oh, you can't leave yet. You have to go forward. There's one way to go. And that is into Rin, who establishes with you that there was an explosion, which we just saw in that cutscene, and we better hurry over to Master Clue's dojo to check on him. So we're establishing 3 characters here just in the first 10 seconds of gameplay, 5 seconds of gameplay. Many people will immediately recognize these lanterns as, very Castlevania. Castlevania has this, the old Symphony of the Night was one of the biggest influences on the Twilight Monk game. It's really what I wanted to make, a cross between Zelda 2 on the NES and Castlevania Symphony of the Night. That was our goal. The lanterns themselves breaking and dropping ember, dropping the fuel that you can use for your secondary mystic arts, is kind of one of the first things that I wanted to establish and get into the game. But we introduced those really early on. This statue right here is Ancient Tenza. Now, this particular spot right here, this specific spot, is the spot where in the novels, in the first novel, there's a moment where Rin and Raz are laying down by these statues, these crumbled statues. You'll see another one over here. So this is Ancient Tenza, and this is Ancient Torah. They're descendants of these ancients. And so these statues, they're laying down in the grass and they're staring up at the stars. They were also on their way to Clue's dojo. They're staring up in the stars and they're like, the world needs heroes like the ancients, but they're gone. They've been gone for 1,000 years. People don't even know if they exist, and they've just fallen into legend. And some people think that the monks at the monastery that are living there now, all the moonkin at the monastery are just there. They're just using this legend as a way to maintain their power or something. And so the 2 kids, they realized the monastery, all the monks there are pacifists, but they needed heroes like those ancients that they looked up to. And they're also represented in the stars as well, but we don't really get to see much of the constellations. It was decided at some point, let's put the player on rails for these first couple of areas, because when we got playtesters playing it early on, they didn't know what to do. So it's really important to have some kind of a tutorial here, and so you bump into these tutorials. In hindsight, a part of me wishes that I could maybe like put it on a sign so you could revisit that tutorial, and maybe we'll modify that. It's important that players know very early on, hey, you can get extra height by dropping your pillar. So we put in the tutorial. There could have been other ways to hint that to the player. For example, we might have done something where there's like a symbol of the pillar on the ground right here or something like that, but then how do you communicate you can jump up on it? It's really tricky without some kind of a visual indicator. And it was very important that we didn't have any monsters in that first area, by the way, because we didn't want to bombard the player with anything stressful right away. Like your first area of a game really just has to be about setting a tone, setting a stage, and also giving the player a little bit of room to figure out, where do I go? How do I move in this game? Can I go up, down? Can I attack up? Can I attack down? Can I, can I double jump? What are the basics of movement? You establish that in the first couple of rooms. You're establishing a language that you're going to want the player to know as they're playing through the game. And this is also deliberate and intentional. It's to let you know, hey, there is another path, but you don't have that ability yet. Because if we didn't have that little cut scene of him telling you, hey, maybe I got to go around to that, the player might have sat here and tried to do this for 20 minutes, and why can't I get up there? Is there some way? No, there isn't. And that's what the little cut scene confirms that. This is also super important. Oh my God. I still love how it looks. I'm so proud of this game. These bombable walls didn't look like that in the beginning. They just looked like rubble. And I decided later, well, we really want to communicate that maybe that's like a breakable wall. And somebody was like, oh, but the rocks look so different than everywhere else. Yeah, that's important. I want the player to look at that very suspiciously. Like, oh, that looks like a bomb shape, like drawn on the paper. And it looks like maybe it's pretty fragile, like it could break apart. So that subtly communicates, you're going to get some abilities and you might want to come back, bring those back. So when you're planning out your monsters and you're laying out your monsters where they're going to be, you want to subtly communicate a little bit of story, but also not add too much challenge or complexity. Like these guys are just undead shamblers and they're just roaming back and forth. They're not really doing anything. They're not throwing projectiles. They're not really even a threat. In fact, you could just stand up here and whoop on these guys. But it's also important to make sure that you're not throwing too much at the player too aggressively. This is not Elden Ring. This is not Dark Souls. I'm not going to like beat the player up in the first few minutes of the game. We want to subtly communicate like, hey, learn how to use your attack. You learn how to jump over enemies, You don't want to be throwing something super hardcore and challenging at the player too quickly. And so we also wanted to give the player a level up very quickly so that the player learns very early on in their gameplay experience that, yes, you're going to be leveling up. You're going to be getting stronger. And in fact, if you look at your inventory, you'll see that you've got the Phantom Pillar. It's already at level 2. And you see that your damage is ranging from 4 to 5. So that is increasing as you're leveling up. You're getting more powerful. It teaches the player right away. It's an RPG. It's not just a game where you're going to be fighting the monsters with the same power level throughout the whole thing. No, you're going to be growing more and more powerful. There's also a subtlety going on in the narrative here with the types of enemies that you're fighting. So for example, we see these undead shambler guys. We see them, they're just roaming back and forth. But wait a minute, they look like they were once warriors. And we are also seeing these blue flame guys. And that was the blue flame we saw when we saw the explosion at the very beginning cutscene, right? So the subtle storytelling that is happening here is communicating a kind of like, oh, wait a minute, are these like undead guys rising? They're not super dangerous, but they're certainly, they seem like they're ethereal with these blue flame guys, and it seems like they're raising the dead. So there is a significance to that. And also, when you think about the combination of enemies that you're introducing, you start out with something that's very simple and walks towards you on the ground, and then you progress, you add in little flying guys that have a pattern, and when you get close to them, they come directly at you. So you have to time your jumps and your attacks. So we first teach you just basic attacks, Then we teach you jumping and attacking. And then we throw it into combination. We start to increase that challenge. And when we talk about things like level design, look at this. Yes, there's absolutely swimming. You're safe here. We wanted to teach the player. There's a very good chance that if the player hasn't quite gotten a grasp on like the variable jump, like if you just tap it, you get a low jump. If you hold it, you get a longer jump. This is a chance for the player to figure that out. And hey, if they fail, guess what? Oh, there's a little bit of subtle subconscious thing they're being taught here too, which is, well, wait a minute. I can swim, but I can't descend into the water. And if I go across here, I might even find secrets if I start looking around. And in fact, when you start to look at what's off screen here, you see this treasure chest in this other room. There's a chamber. And you might even go at this point, well, wait a minute, I can't break through there, but is there a map or something? Let me check my buttons. And then you find out, oh yeah, I do. I have a map. And in this map, it shows you little doorways that can communicate to you subtly, oh, there must be passages underwater. There must be passages to rooms that I don't have access to yet. And I don't have the full map yet to see where those rooms are. Maybe there's a way that I can collect everything in here. You notice like those numbers along the top right. Oh yeah, there's some kind of white flame thing that looks like my health container. There's green gems, there's blue gems. What are those things? You're asking questions and you're starting to get some answers through this first level, which is your tutorial level of play. And so, dudes, I don't want to go too much into it, but user interface and map, like the map system, had to go through a lot of iterations in design. I've worked on a lot of games, and I can tell you, user interface, so underappreciated. But when you get it right, it's right. And sometimes you got to make tough decisions because developing a whole new system like a Fog of War system might have taken an extra month of development or more. Plus playtesting and all these technical challenges. So sometimes you're just like, what gets the focal point of adventuring without giving the player too much information so that they take away that fun part of discovery? Like that's the tricky part with like a map system. And I think we nailed it. Like it's really solid. It still feels good, but it's also mysterious. And so if we were to progress along here, we take these guys out. Again, not too challenging, not too hard, but we notice now we're killing them in one hit. So we're already more powerful right away. In fact, everything we hit, we're just crushing in one hit. So we already feel, on a small scale, we're feeling the impact of playing and growing and leveling up and getting more powerful. And here, this is a subtle subconscious thing that we're playing a little bit with the player's mind to communicate what we want them to do. We've seen these jars throughout this whole dungeon so far, this whole area. But now if we attack these, oh, wait a minute. It looked like the wall cracked a little bit there. What if I hit it again? Boom. Oh, it looks like it's breaking away. So we hit it again. Hidden room revealed, right? Very, very cool. And we get ourselves a little bit of an extra treasure chest with some gold. And oh, wait a minute. What's that? Little blue spider down there. What is that thing? And more treasure. There's clearly going to be a way to get down there, but we probably don't have access to that yet. And this is, again, very much subtly communicating the gameplay that we want the player, how we want the player to interact with the full game. And we see it here too, where it's very clear you can't get up there. There's really no way to get up there. You might be able to if you were to lure this guy over and then get him to knock you up there. Like that might work actually. And that would be okay. We allow the player to be creative. If you find a creative way to get access to areas, we're not going to stop you from doing that unless if it's going to break the full game experience for you. And we've play tested the heck out of this game to make sure that you can't really break the game as best to our ability. You never know though. You see these videos of people showing the developers how they speed ran their game in 20 minutes. We give the player a little bit of a tutorial here in case that they're not familiar with how save shrines work. And this was a difficult decision because with a game like this, a lot of people might say, oh, well, why didn't you do auto-saving, right? Well, one of the reasons is because a game like this, we want the player to feel an incredible sense of relief when they do find a save shrine. And there's a subtle, unspoken dialogue that goes on. If you notice these, we're teaching the player immediately, look, there's these candles with the blue flames, these green candles with blue flames, and you'll see them in the connecting rooms between every save shrine. And that gives the player this incredible sense of relief. And if you've already noticed, the music cuts out right here to also let you know, hey, whoa, before you move forward, you might want to go back and save. Just make sure that you've gone back and saved, because when the music cuts out like that, there might be a boss up ahead. There might be some reason why the music's cutting out. And for those of you who know the novels, you're going to immediately recognize that's Nox in his halfway transformed dark sprite form. Ah, there he is, the hero of Crescent Isle, come to save the day. Or maybe you want to finish the job. Thief, betrayer, snake. Anyway, Nox is he's halfway on the road to becoming a dark sprite. And this is something that, first of all, the music through this part is exceptional. This particular track was done by Chris Nairn, who worked with me on the Aikida game. But I asked him, give me something that sounds like a mysterious exposition from a villain about to reveal their dark, sinister plans. I think the track is even called Sinister Plans. And so this is where we're setting up what's the villain's motivation. And I've communicated this many times before, but this story takes place immediately after the two illustrated novels, The Secrets of Kung Fulio and Return of the Ancients, both of which are available on Amazon in paperback with 75 illustrations in each book. They tell the story of what the Moonkin are, what the Ancients are, and Nox was intent. He was so certain that he was going to be the chosen one, the one that the Ancients would come back and use him as their vessel, but instead they chose Raziel. So he has an incredible bitterness towards Raz. So Nox had transformed in The Secrets of Kung Fulio and Return of the Ancients. He had transformed into a serpent. He had transformed into his dark sprite form and betrayed the monastery, betrayed the masters, and betrayed the purpose of the ancients because he wasn't chosen. Nox becomes obsessed with revenge. He can't stand that he's been rejected. He's always been the strongest. He's always been the most powerful. How could he not be chosen by the ancients? And how could they choose Raziel Tenza, this dweeb? You know, he can't stand it. And he's got a very kind of thug-like mentality, and he wants to make sure that he comes back and destroys Crescent Isle. Nox says, it turns out Master Clue kept more than trinkets in his underground stash. Yes, in the novels, we really establish that Master Clue is one of the masters at the monastery, but he runs a dojo outside of town. It's sort of like the last vestige, the last architecture of the remnants of the ancient monks of Twilight. In that stash, he has several trinkets, magically infused trinkets, tons of like ancient kung fu mystic arts and weaponry down there, as well as even dark sprites that have been contained and sealed away into small stone effigies, which Nox at one point was contained in one of these small stone effigies. But when the explosion happened, he was freed, as well as many other dark sprites. And so that's what we're going to be finding out throughout this part of the sort of exposition and the next part. And I tried to set all that up in the beginning so that throughout most of the adventure of the story, you're not getting bombarded with big changes and big tons of drops of lore. It's all mostly optional. So Nox doesn't want to fight you himself. He doesn't do any of his own fighting anymore. He just summons forth the Phantasmal Lantern, and the Phantasmal Lantern has a bunch of blue flames within it, so you'll see that in a moment. He calls you a butthead. He's just a thug. He's just a plain old thug. And I love the way he dives through into his portal. So when we see the Phantasmal Lantern, every introduction of a boss fight, I wanted to do very much like a sort of a Zelda introduction, where you get like a cool, subtle description of what it is, as well as a nice reveal, a nice roar, as we've called it throughout development. And so they all kind of, when you build out your game, you want to sort of establish a consistency, a sort of a language of how you're going to structure your boss fights and how you're going to structure, for instance, during the boss fight, are you using abilities you just got? Are you what are you teaching the player? And every step of the way, wow, this guy is just barely dodging every move I make. I don't know if I'm going to be able to beat this guy. He's meant to be easy, but the point of this fight is to teach you that you have to time your jumps. There is also a way you could jump off of there and kick him if you wanted to get up there that way. It's also about teaching you that you can lure enemies underneath by going underneath him. Watch. If you go underneath him, it'll lure him down. And so there's a little bit of kiting the enemy into somewhere where you can attack him. He's not always going to be available. Oh no, I am not doing good. Oh, I got to level up. So that's another beautiful thing about the level up, is that it'll refill your health. We wanted to be super generous with the player. We wanted to make sure that the player never felt like they were completely screwed if they didn't do things exactly the way we wanted them. We wanted to give them all kinds of boosts and power-ups and abilities. So yeah, giving the player full health if they get a level up allows them to strategically plan. Like, you can go, I'm going to wait until this boss fight so that I level up during the boss fight, get an extra full health boost to push through to the finale of the battle. And sometimes those random elements, if you're not paying attention to it, can just be a nice welcome surprise. So it was a difficult decision. At one point in the script, you did fight Nox himself. And I thought, it would be really satisfying to fight Nox in this particular part. And ultimately, I decided it's not the best decision because he's sort of the big villain of the game. And to get crushed by him too early is just unsatisfactory. I hate when a game makes you lose a fight. That would suck. So I ultimately decided it's more weaselly if he always just went nah, fighting is for little kids. He just weasels his way out of it. When he can win, it's not stupid. But when he knows he'll lose, it's stupid. Just the most low-class, weaselly, not respectable way to do anything. And he kind of has just this attitude. And we want to fight him. We absolutely want to fight Nox. And I wanted to create a character that you wanted to punch in the face. But ultimately, I decided it would be better if he just threw out another enemy for you to fight. So he flings out this phantasmal lantern. The concept of the phantasmal lantern was that this lantern would contain many enemy types, and that in a way they were contained within it, but then they become freed. And so that's kind of what you see when you see the explosion. And then the fight itself, this one was really tricky. I had to work out, this is how I work out my boss fights. I start out with a sort of a storyboard, and I used this as a template for all future boss fights and all future enemy design, where you could see in the storyboards, this is how they behave, this is the pattern that they would follow, and then when this happens or that happens, that's when they change patterns, and that's what's called a state machine. Once they've reached a certain point, they change their state, so to speak. And so in this case, I thought it'd be interesting if the player they just couldn't reach him with, at any given time. You have to wait for the right moment or kite him down. And you see that in the storyboards. You see that in the descriptions of the text. Ultimately, yes, it did go through some changes. Ultimately, we added some of these flaming meteor type of rocks that you can't destroy, but he's also flinging out enemies at you the whole time. And those were the concepts that really stuck, and they stayed. This was technically the second boss fight that we worked on. And I found that in a lot of cases, I can just do a storyboard like this and do the sprites and the basic keyframes for the sprites. And then I pass that over to Matt, who is our enemy programmer. And he has a really great sense of timing and impact. And he's designed a couple of indie games himself. He's been working on indie games for a long time. So he and I are just very synced up, and I could just trust him to really handle and wrangle the timing on the movements of things. And this is a very important part, because the gameplay programming really needs player feel. It needs good feel in the way that enemies get impacted and the way that enemies or bosses they will hit. But anyway, I wanted to include that storyboards into these kind of documentations, because it's very rare that you would even get to see something like that. But hey, I have a YouTube channel. I can do that. Let's do it. I did a longer version of this, but it's way too long, so let's just skip across that unless you're a member. And this, my dudes, is my favorite part of what makes Twilight Monk so unique, is these hand-drawn in a 3D space kind of an overworld. And I am quite eager to get into the nitty-gritty details of what makes this work, how it ticks. I'm going to show you some of the 3D models. I'm going to show you side views, so you can see the illusion that's created here. It's very mystical, very magical, very whimsical. and I can't wait to share it with you. This video's gone on pretty long, so what I'm going to suggest for now is like, hey, don't forget to subscribe. I want to do more of these. Please drop in the comments below more things that you'd like to know about. If you found something that's hidden, there are a lot of Easter eggs, even just in Dojo Path. Right now, you can go and play this demo. You can play through this very first part of the game. It's a good chunk of time, so set aside about 2 hours for yourself. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for stopping by. Please do check out Twilight Monk. I'm going to show you the new trailer here at the end of this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, ciao.